What if I told you one of the NBA's most effective young forwards was a player scouts once wrote off as too unathletic to succeed? No jaw-dropping vertical, no viral highlights, no superstar label. Just a kid from Israel who was told he didn't have the tools to keep up in the world's fastest league. That player is Deni Avdija. But here we are, just a few years later. In Portland, he's proving how an underdog can carve out dominance in his own way. Before Deni Avdija ever stepped onto an NBA court, his basketball journey was already set in motion thousands of miles away in Israel. Born in 2001 in the small town of Beit Zera, Avdija grew up in a family where sports was their lifeline. His father, Zufer, had already lived two basketball lives, first as a player for Yugoslav powerhouse Crvena Zvezda, then as a respected veteran in Israel. His mother, Sharon, competed in track and field. That mix of Serbian toughness and Israeli grit gave Deni both size and competitiveness, but it also grounded him. Friends and coaches often described him as mature beyond his years, someone who studied the game instead of relying only on natural ability. When he joined Maccabi Tel Aviv's youth program, Avdija quickly gained attention not just for scoring, but for doing all the small things coaches value: boxing out, reading passing lanes, making the extra pass. It was clear he had more than just a love for the game. At only 16 years old, Avdija became the youngest player ever to debut for Maccabi's senior team. He also began standing out internationally. Avdija represented Israel in junior competitions, and by the time he was 18, he led the national under-20 team to back-to-back FIBA European Championship titles, even earning MVP honors in 2019. The real turning point came in 2020, when Avdija became the youngest player to win the Israeli Basketball Premier League MVP. That accomplishment was rare for any teenager, let alone one from a country with a limited basketball tradition on the global stage. So while his club achievements at Maccabi built his resume, it was his leadership on the international stage that truly put him on NBA radars. He was a player who already knew how to carry a team. When the 2020 NBA draft rolled around, Deni Avdija wasn't seen as a can't-miss star. Unlike American college stars who played on national television every week, Avdija's body of work came mostly from Maccabi Tel Aviv and international tournaments. That meant decision-makers had to project what kind of player he might become. And projections aren't always kind to overseas talent. Some saw him as a versatile forward with elite basketball IQ, someone who could switch between roles and adapt to any system. Others dismissed him as limited athletically, warning he might struggle to keep up with the speed and physicality of the NBA. And that's the word that kept following him around: unathletic. And in today's league, where vertical highlights and speed often decide draft stock, that label can crush a prospect's value. Many analysts dismissed him as a low-ceiling role player, the kind of pick that helps at the margins but never moves the needle. The Washington Wizards, however, saw something else. At 9th overall, they didn't just take a flyer on an international prospect. They bet on a player who had already been competing against professionals since his mid-teens. They valued his vision, his composure under pressure, and his willingness to do the dirty work instead of forcing highlights. For Israel, his selection was more than a draft pick. Avdija wasn't just the highest Israeli ever drafted. He was carrying the weight of disproving an entire stereotype, that players from smaller basketball nations lacked the tools to succeed at the highest level. But here's the thing. Entering the NBA with that unathletic underdog tag didn't discourage him, and by the time he put on that Wizards jersey, the label wasn't holding him back anymore. It was setting the stage for him to flip the narrative. Avdija's rookie season was not the fairy tale some fans back home might have expected. The NBA isn't forgiving, especially for players carrying the unathletic label. Right away, opposing wings tested him, pushing him off the dribble, forcing him into switches, and daring him to shoot from deep. It was like a trial, with fire. Playing alongside star Bradley Beal, Avdija rarely had the ball in his hands. He was asked to space the floor, defend multiple positions, and do the quiet, thankless jobs. And for someone drafted in the lottery, that role drew criticism. Analysts questioned if he was too passive. Fans wondered if he could ever be more than a role player. Injuries are often the biggest hurdle for any NBA player, and for Deni Avdija, a fractured right ankle early in his career threatened to slow his progress. After months of rehab, careful conditioning, and mental preparation, many wondered if he could return to his previous form, let alone improve. But this is where the underdog mentality mattered. Instead of backing out, Avdija used those years to refine the details of his game. He committed to defense, sharpened his footwork, and studied film relentlessly. He wasn't going to outjump or outsprint his opponents, so he focused on being in the right spot, making the right rotation, and playing with energy every single possession. By his third season, coaches started to notice. He wasn't the kid trying to fit in anymore. He was one of Washington's most reliable defenders, guarding the opposing team's best scorers and showing a willingness to take on the dirty work nobody else wanted. The league hadn't given him respect yet, but his grind was laying the foundation for something bigger, the version of Deni Avdija who would no longer be overlooked. By his fourth season, Avdija had clearly leveled up. The same player who was once doubted for being too passive suddenly looked confident with the ball in his hands. His shooting mechanics had tightened, his release was quicker, and his three-point accuracy climbed. Opponents could no longer sag off and dare him to shoot. Night after night, he was matched against some of the league's toughest wings, the kind of players who define matchups. And instead of being overwhelmed, he held his ground. Coaches started trusting him in closing lineups, a major sign of respect in a league driven by matchups. What stood out most was his versatility. Avdija could grab a rebound, push the ball in transition, make the extra pass, or finish through contact. He wasn't dominating in the traditional superstar way, dropping 40 every night, but in the way that impacts winning across every possession. If you've enjoyed this video so far, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more NBA content like this. So, after several seasons with the Washington Wizards, Deni Avdija's career took a decisive turn in the summer of 2024. The Wizards traded him to the Portland Trail Blazers. For many players, a trade can be unsettling. A sudden move to a new city, new teammates, and a new system. But for Avdija, it became an opportunity to redefine his role and showcase the full extent of his abilities. At that time, the Blazers were in a transitional phase, blending rising stars like Scoot Henderson and Anfernee Simons with veteran leadership and a need for versatile two-way players. The front office saw in Avdija exactly what they needed, a player who could defend multiple positions, create plays, and bring stability to a young, evolving roster. Unlike some trades that felt transactional, this one presented a chance for him to be central to the team's future. Upon arrival, Avdija faced the familiar challenges of moving to a new system. He needed to learn Portland's schemes, understand Coach Chauncey Billups' expectations, and build chemistry with teammates who were still developing their own roles. Yet, he approached it with characteristic intelligence and dedication. Film sessions, extra shooting drills, and one-on-one conversations with the coaching staff allowed him to integrate seamlessly and quickly grasp where he could make the most impact. The trade also gave him a renewed sense of purpose. In Washington, Avdija had steadily improved, but often felt limited by role constraints and offensive hierarchies. But Portland presented a fresh canvas, a team willing to leverage his versatility, reward his defensive instincts, and rely on his high basketball IQ to orchestrate offense without forcing him into a pure scoring role. By the start of the 2024-25 season, it was clear that the move to Portland was more than just a change. It was a chance for Avdija to flourish, turning a new chapter into a defining one. Today, Deni Avdija is not just that international project, or the kid scouts once called unathletic. He's one of the most important players on the floor every night for the Trailblazers, and he's doing it by rewriting what dominance looks like. His scoring has taken a jump, proving he can punish defenses that give him space. He's finishing stronger inside, hitting open shots with confidence and demanding more touches. But what truly separates him is the balance. He scores when needed, creates for teammates, and still takes pride in shutting down the other team's best option. That all-around package is rare, and it's exactly why the Unathletic label has aged so poorly. Avdija has proven you don't need a 45-inch vertical to dominate. You can dominate with timing, positioning, toughness, and the kind of relentless motor that wears opponents down over 4 quarters. What makes it even more powerful is the context. An underdog from Israel, a country with no track record of producing NBA stars, now making headlines, not for potential, but for performance. Deni Avdija isn't chasing respect anymore. He's earning it, one possession at a time. For Israel, he represents something rare. Proof that a player from a small basketball nation can not only make the NBA, but thrive in it. Kids who once only wore jerseys of American stars now see one of their own playing meaningful minutes on the biggest stage in the world. That impact stretches beyond Israel too. Avdija's journey is part of the larger wave of international players reshaping the league. For years, scouts were quick to dismiss overseas talent if it didn't fit the mold of elite athleticism. But Avdija has shown there are other ways to succeed through IQ, toughness, and versatility. He's redefining what it means to dominate and doing it without chasing the stereotypes that held him back. His presence also gives the Blazers something they've lacked, an identity piece that fans can rally behind. On a team often stuck between rebuilding and competing, Avdija's steady improvement offers direction. And perhaps that's the real story. The Unathletic Underdog label was supposed to limit him. Instead, it became the backdrop for one of the most compelling climbs in the league. Underdogs don't just survive, sometimes they take over. Deni Avdija isn't just part of the league anymore. He's changing how people think about what it takes to belong. So here's the question that keeps coming up. What's the limit for Deni Avdija? Because players like him aren't supposed to exist in today's NBA. The scouting reports didn't predict dominance. They said he lacked the burst, the raw power, the scoring toolkit to ever be more than solid. And yet, every season, he takes another step forward. Right now, Avdija is sitting at a crossroads. On one hand, he's already carved out a career most players would kill for, a trusted defender, a reliable rebounder, a connector who makes teammates better. On the other side, there's the possibility that he's not done climbing, that he can make the jump from respected starter to all-star level difference maker. The key? Offense. Defensively, he's already elite. The guy coaches trust with their toughest assignments. But if the scoring keeps climbing, if the outside shot hardens into consistency, if he learns to punish defenses that dare to leave him open, that's when Avdija stops being just valuable and starts being unavoidable. And think about the timing. Portland is building something new, with Scoot Henderson as the engine, Shaedon Sharpe as the explosive scorer, and Donovan Clingan anchoring the middle. Every rebuild needs glue, someone who ties the system together, but also someone who can step forward when the others stumble. That's the role Avdija is quietly growing into. Not just a role player, but a cornerstone. The truth is, Avdija has already beaten the narrative. The so-called unathletic underdog from Israel wasn't supposed to change games in the NBA. He wasn't supposed to dictate matchups. He wasn't supposed to thrive. But here we are. And yet, even with all he's accomplished, the story isn't finished. Avdija's journey has always been about growth, about taking the next challenge and turning it into a new standard. In Portland, every game is another test. Can he read the defense faster? Can he make the subtle pass that leads to a highlight no one saw coming? Can he stretch his offensive game just enough to pull defenders out of position, opening space for teammates? The beauty of Avdija's rise is that it's never about the spotlight. It's about the accumulation of small victories, winning the battle on the boards, forcing a turnover, or making the rotation that prevents a fast break. Each play builds momentum, not just for him, but for the team. And as Portland continues to shape its next chapter, Avdija isn't just along for the ride, he's helping steer the ship. He has shown that being underestimated can be a gift. It sharpens focus, fuels, and allows a player to quietly carve a path that the critics can't predict. If this is the peak of his potential, it's already impressive. But if he keeps building, adding confidence, expanding his scoring, commanding the floor, there's no telling just how far the unathletic underdog from Israel can go. So maybe the real ceiling isn't about stats or labels. Maybe it's about proving the league wrong over and over again until they stop calling him an underdog altogether.